All right, before I dig in, let me show you what this thing is, and I'll point out some of the features on it and how it works. First of all, this is a Neptune brand 2-cycle outboard boat motor, 1.2 horsepower, made in 1938. The fuel tank has some rot on both sides, and we need to get this removed because I don't know the extent of the rot yet. The engine does feel like it has compression. And in the last video, we got it to pop off a few times by just adding some 2-cycle mix to the combustion chamber. So I'm pretty sure it's gonna run. This has an aluminum body and a steel exhaust. These pipes here look like they could be brass. Tiny little prop. Again, this is only a 1.2 horsepower. We've got a tiny little combustion chamber right there. Normal size spark plug. Again, we got some rot on the fuel tank here. Here's our fuel valve, and it runs down here to the carburetor. I'm guessing this here must be some sort of a air fuel mix. I'm not sure about that yet. The exhaust runs down this tube and out that hole. This handle here is fixed by a couple of mismatched fasteners there, and that's how you steer. This lever here has a button on the end, and there's a wire underneath there, so I'm assuming this is a kill button. There doesn't appear to be a throttle on this engine, so I think this lever is just a magneto spark advance, which in effect raises and lowers the RPM. So the first thing I'm going to do is tackle this fuel tank. The research I've done so far is telling me that these are not available for sale, either as reproductions or as originals on eBay or elsewhere. I don't see any on the internet, so I think we're gonna be forced to at least try to repair this fuel tank. Oh boy, look at that. So this thing is completely clogged. Yeah, we got some serious rust and scale going on inside there. This tank is made out of steel. You know that Flex Seal tape that you see on the infomercials? Well, I've had a roll of it for a few years, and let's see if it works. I'm going to cover up the rod on the left and the right, and then I'm going to fill it with liquid just to see if we have leaks from anywhere else. I put the valve back on the bottom of the tank so we could use that as a stopper. And let's just see what happens. Holding it in this orientation, it's filled up to right about there. I don't see any obvious leaks coming from down there. Now let's flip it horizontal. I want to add a little bit more water to it to make sure that it gets filled all the way to the top so we can test the whole thing. Well, it was kind of a funny thing that Flex Seal tape worked. I filled the tank completely up with water, and there were no leaks coming from underneath the tape. However, there were many other leaks coming from the bottom of the tank and all along the front of it. After this, I soaked the tank in Evaporust overnight, and there were probably twice as many leaks as I had before. So this tank is beyond repair, in my opinion. I'll just show you some of the obvious ones. There's a patch there with a bunch of holes. There's a couple holes there. There's another grouping of holes right here on the left front. I think there's a couple right there. There's another patch of holes right there, and there's a big hole right there, and then another patch of holes starting from there to about there. So this is beyond my skill level. I don't know, maybe this can all be brazed, but the rod on both sides is, the metal is super thin there. Long story short, this tank just isn't worth the time. I don't know about you guys, but I have always been pretty successful on eBay finding rare items. Unfortunately, I could not find one of these, but there was another one that caught my eye and I bought it. And here it is. This obviously is not the same tank, but this is an original tank from the same brand. This is a Neptune brand tank from a different model, Outboard. And you can see it's got that same radius. So I went ahead and bought this, hoping it wouldn't leak. I've already transferred the fuel valve onto this one. Somebody has brazed this one. You can tell it did have some leaks. The brazing work here is not very pretty, and it looks a little bit better over there. But it doesn't leak from the bottom. But somebody went to the trouble of cleaning the outside of it, so it's scuffed down to bare metal. This one is aluminum, by the way. And it looks like they may have even gone as far as filling a couple of holes here and there. But like I said, this still has the same radius. It still has the same look, if you will. And I really like it. So when I got the tank, the first thing I did was fill it up with water. And unfortunately, I found 3 leaks. I found 3 holes. There was one right there. There was one right there. And another one right there. So I got this stuff off of Terrell's website a few months ago, and I used it to patch these holes, and it worked really well. You can see I haven't sanded them down or anything yet. You can see it's sticking up a little bit there. I don't know what this stuff is exactly, but when it dries, it kind of feels like plastic. Anyway, those 3 holes are now fixed, and the tank is completely leak-free. So I think in the process of restoring this little engine, I'm going to go ahead and paint this tank, and before I do, I'll sand these down so they're not sticking up and looking ugly. I'll try to make them look a little bit nicer. You know, the tank isn't perfect itself, but it's pretty good. Unfortunately, I don't have a fuel cap for it, so I'm going to have to source one of those somehow. It's not a standard 1.5 inches, it's a little bit larger than that. But if we come over here to the engine, I'll just hold the tank up there. That's about how I want it to sit and look. I think it actually looks really good. Unfortunately, like I said, this is for a different model, so the bracketry on the bottom is completely different. This one has 2 mounting flanges here and a 3rd one in the rear middle. This one only has these 2 here, and they're not even the same length because maybe that occurred during the brazing process or something. That was the only way they could do it. So like I said, this is a little bit ugly, but it doesn't leak at all, and it's a decent tank, so we're going to go with this. So I just need to fabricate some brackets for this to fit on the engine. So I went back in my bucket of steel scrap, and I found this piece. This is some type of a coated steel. I don't think it's stainless, but it's nice and shiny, and it could be polished or painted. And this is what I used to make the brackets with. So out of this one piece of flat stock, I was able to make the 3 brackets I needed. This one is for the left side. This is for the right side, it's just a little bit longer. And this is for the center rear. And this one doesn't physically secure the tank with any kind of a fastener, but the tank, I'll show you, it comes down and sits on the top of it. And I just put some shrink wrap over the metal and heated it up, just so it wouldn't be metal on metal when the tank was resting here. And let me go show you how it turned out. In order to get the tank perfectly centered, I had to use a little standoff here on the right side, but we won't be able to see that when the tank is on. So just have to line up these tabs now. It's a little closer, so this comes in. All right, I've got the tank on there and secured. It was kind of tricky to get everything straight. You know, I wanted the tank to be straight this way, also front to back, and I also wanted a uniform gap right in here. And all that took a while to get everything to line up the way I wanted it to. I also wanted to make sure there was room to get a socket on the spark plug, so the fuel valve wasn't too close to the spark plug. So the spark plug wire goes there, of course, and I need to put the boot back on it. And the fuel line will go from there to there. And the fuel line that was on it before isn't going to reach anymore because the old spigot from the old tank was right there. So we have to go that much farther. My local hardware store didn't have this size of line, so I'll have to order some of that. In the meantime, I'm just gonna cut this old piece in half and put a rubber fuel line in the center just for now, and that'll work until we get the new line. The hose is a little bit large in diameter, but hopefully it won't leak, at least good enough for us to test this out. So I think all that's left to see if this engine is going to run or not is put some fuel in the tank and pull the rope. I don't have a gas cap for the tank yet, so I've just been using a piece of tape. And I'm going to try some True Fuel 40:1. I'm not going to put a whole lot in here because if this all works, I'm just going to take everything back apart to paint it. All right, let's turn on the fuel and see if our hose leaks or not. Hopefully it won't. Well, unfortunately, the carburetor is leaking like a sieve. So that's not good. I'm gonna try to start it anyway, and then we'll turn the fuel off. Now remember, if this runs, we're not gonna run it for very long because it's not in water. I just wanna see if it's gonna run on its own fuel, and we'll shut it off and go from there. Now we've still got spark. All right, I got it to pop off camera, so I wanted to bring you back when I tried it again. I think what might have happened when I turned on the fuel and the carburetor started overflowing, I think the crankcase may have also got a bunch of fuel into it, so it probably just flooded the crap out of it. So right now I've got the fuel off. Hopefully there's still enough in the system to run for a couple seconds, and we'll see what she does. Oh yeah. She actually sounded really good. Kind of rough there at first and then cleaned itself up. Probably because all that fuel was in there. That's good enough. We don't want to run it anymore until we get in a bucket of water. And let's go ahead and get that done. All right, I've been fiddling around with this for a while. Got my bucket of water set up here. And I've just been trying to figure out how the impeller works, which shaft the water is being drawn up through. And it seems to be this one. It's sucking it up this way into the crankcase, and then I think it's coming out of this one, but I'm not sure about that. right, so I took this fitting off here just to make sure we're getting complete water cooling circulation. And I'll start it up real quick and keep your eye right there. We just want to make sure that water is coming out of there. So again, the way the system works, the impeller draws water up this small shaft here into the crankcase, then it comes out the side of the cylinder head and then goes down into the same pipe as the exhaust and gets exited right down there underwater. So this is pretty much all good news. The motor sounds like it runs pretty well. The water circulation system works. The prop shaft works. Our fuel tank holds fuel and does not leak. And I'm happy with the way I have it mounted with those brackets. We need to replace that fuel line. I need to make this a little bit cleaner on the spark plug wire and put the boot back on. And I need to take the carburetor off and rebuild it, or at least clean it, because it just isn't working right. With the fuel on, the carburetor will just constantly overflow and flood out the crankcase. And there's a few other things that need to be addressed. This handle is kind of dorked up, and this shaft here is kind of cobbled together. I'm not sure what's going on there, but that needs to be removed and either replaced or fixed. I also need to find a fuel cap that fits, and then we can think about maybe cleaning this up and painting it and polishing the brass and polishing the aluminum. I think this is really going to turn out nice. So I'm going to wrap this one up right here. Thanks everybody for watching. As always, I appreciate the support, and I think this is going to be a fun little project. And because I've never worked on one of these before, this will be a learning experience for me. So I hope to see everybody on the next video, and we'll move forward with this little project. Take care, everybody.